Today we are starting a new book. It's Friendly Rivalry by Flux Uchiha. It's 21 chapters, 26-ish thousand words. Here's the summary. Izuku has volunteered to work at a nursing home for old, retired, and reformed villains, all being from generations that didn't have the Quirkless means useless mentality ingrained into them. They're up for helping him be a hero. Today we will be reading just chapter 1. I hope you enjoy. Chapter 1. All for One, or Tenki Shigaraki, as he was known now, was somewhat bored. Admittedly, it was his own fault. He was the one who up and decided to retire and set himself up in this retirement home for reformed supervillains. He'd just been tired, looking for a change in pace, and decided to come here. He left Tomura in charge with all the stuff he needed and entered himself into the retirement home for reformed villains. It had been good for a long while, trading stories of his villainy with the other people, doing activities he'd hardly even gotten to do as a kid, so that was fun. But he was getting a bit bored and restless. Then the manager person announced they'd be getting a new person, a kid who was going to be volunteering here. Well, maybe it'd be fun to terrorize the squirt when he arrived. The other residents seemed to be thinking the same thing. They were villains at some point after all. What was wrong with a little bit of mild tormenting of a kid who volunteered to do it? Just a bit of mostly harmless fun. The kid, no more than perhaps 13, arrived roughly 20 minutes later, entering somewhat timidly, hands quivering slightly. Residents, this is Izuku Midoriya. He'll be helping around here and interacting with you all. Treat him gently, he's quirkless. Huh. Midoriya, where had he heard that name before? He'd have to think on it. Tenki watched with no little interest as the kid flinched at the designation, watching them all warily from under his bangs. He had little doubt that most of the residents had a little interest in treating the kid gently. Most were from generations that had a lot of quirkless people, and he himself was from the first generation where almost everyone was quirkless. Hey kid, Huda Guy, Ten Guy, Quirk, hiding in plain sight, deceptively powerful, wasn't actually caught, termed himself in. The kid turned to face him, then lit up. You're Waldo, or were, I guess. Your quirk is so cool. He devolved into a muttering, and Tenki listened with interest. Can always hide in plain sight, no matter how busy the area or what he's wearing. Really useful in not getting caught. Weak to medical quirks. Well, now he was impressed. Few people, let alone kids, would have managed that, let alone recognizing Hideki. I'm flattered, Hideki said amusedly, but call me Hideki. I'm retired and reformed. Izuku bobbed his head quickly. Of course. Well, maybe this wasn't going to be his disadvantage. Maybe he'd be getting something out of this whole adventure, besides some new tactics other villains have used. The kid was clearly intelligent, and with his quirkless status, had all the spite needed to become a backup inheritor if Tomura failed. Yes, that would do. Tomura had been rather unstable anyway, and it would be good to have a backup plan. Izuku had decided to volunteer at the retirement home in hopes that it would appear on his record and help QA, or whatever school he applied to, look past his quirklessness. He researched villains from the right time era for the 2 weeks before the volunteering started. They had to check his paperwork and his mom's, then his father's, which was a whole hassle. But finally, everything had been approved, and Izuku was clear to start volunteering. Due to his researching frenzy the past 2 weeks, Izuku could safely identify all but one of the reformed villains in the room. Waldo was the one who'd spoken. Shadow Dancer and Mastermind were playing chess in the corner, with Bullseye watching them. Mimic was over there doing a puzzle with what looked like Puppeteer and Blackout. Night Flare and Yggdrasil were playing checkers in a different corner. Jester sprawled on a couch nearby, staring at him curiously. Armorly was absently flipping a knife between her fingers as she watched him. And Chiropractor was hanging from the ceiling, well, like a bat. Thanatos and Inspector were sitting on a couch, a little line of bugs circling Insector's hand. Quickstep was fiddling with a crow-stuffed animal for some reason. "Hey," Quickstep said first, grinning. "Hello," Izuku stuttered, bowing slightly to the reformed villain. "You're Quickstep, right? Please, just call me Zen. Less formal that way. I'm old and retired." "Stop calling yourself old," Night Flare snapped, annoyed. "You're barely a child." "If I'm a child, then what does that make him?" Zen complained, pointing to Izuku. "A baby," Night Flare decided after a moment, moving a piece. "Check." Yggdrasil pouted comically. "Rude." It was just so fascinating to see all of them up close, Izuku decided, as Yggdrasil and Night Flare started squabbling. If a bit old to see them squabbling like children. "So, I assume you recognize most of us?" Armory asked, tilting her head curiously. Yeah, you're Armory, right?" She smirked. "Call me Hiki Kid. Can you name anyone else in the room?" "Yeah. Izuku started pointing to the retired villains as he named them off. Night Flare, Yggdrasil, Chiroptera, Jester, Thanatos, Insector, Shadow Dancer, Puppeteer, Blackout, Mimic, Bullseye, Mastermind, and Waldo. Hitsugui. Sorry, sir. I'm not quite sure who you are." "I'm not surprised," he noted calmly. "You may call me Tenki." Izuku dipped into a quick bow, addressing the room at large. "Hello." He could tell they were all assessing him, and he fervently hoped that he was doing fine. What if he wasn't? What if they were judging him for being quirkless? "So, what do you know about knives?" Hiki said, flipping the knife up and catching it by the blade. They're sharp," Izuku offered. "Short-range weapons, although when thrown can be mid to long range, have a short reach better used by either tall people who can make up the reach themselves, or short people who can use the knife to get into people's space to get out of their opponent's range and into their own." He stopped abruptly, flushing bright red when he realized he'd been rambling. Very good, Hiki said, the knife disappearing somewhere. So, did the nurses tell you what you were going to be doing here? Izuku shrugged. Mostly just entertaining you and helping them with tasks, I guess. Cool, Puppeteer said, smiling. We should probably introduce ourselves. I was Puppeteer at one point, and you can call me Ningyomi, or Nin if you prefer. Izuku nodded quickly, storing the information in his brain. He would remember. He couldn't afford to forget a name here. This was your best chance at getting into UA, even without a quirk. Your quirk is really cool, and how strong you've gotten it to practice. Can you interrogate with it? What breaks people out? How long can you hold people under your quirk? Can you hold multiple people under? She chuckled, and Izuku stopped immediately, blushing heavily. I can't, although I suspect if my quirk was a bit stronger, could try. A simple touch will break the hold I have. I can hold people under for up to 8 hours, and if my hold isn't forcibly broken, and I can hold up to 3 people under. Izuku wasn't sure what to make of that, other than storing the information quickly. No one replied to his rambles, usually just telling him to shut up. I was Night Flare, and that idiot was Yggdrasil, Night Flare drawled. He can go trees, I can make black fire. But it's made me go blind in recent years. I'll go by Kuro, and he'll go by Mokuse. If Mokuse, Izuku corrected himself, was annoyed by not getting his own introduction. He showed it for approximately 20 seconds, then went back to trying to beat Kuro at checkers. You have quite an interesting skill there, young man, but perhaps learn to encrypt your notes and stop the muttering habit, Tenki said, smiling at Izuku. Izuku attempted to stutter out a reply, but only an unintelligible mess came out. Tenki just looked amused. Perhaps how to speak would also be in order. He had clearly said it in a teasing, so unlike Kachan's angry, degrading comments. Izuku decided to not talk again for the moment, his face currently a flaming red. Jester giggled, eyes alight with amusement. I was Jester in my time, but you can call me Zun now. Izuku bowed showily, probably still blushing up a storm. It's nice to meet you all. Nice to meet you too, kid, Zen said, waving. If you'll excuse me, I need a nap. How late are you here? 4 o'clock, Izuku said, rubbing the back of his head. I have to be back in time for dinner or my mama will worry. Zen disappeared into one of the hallways, and Izuku was left standing there awkwardly. So, he said cautiously, what do you do usually? Heiki flipped another knife through her fingers. Mosoke and Kuro are almost always playing checkers. It's them wishing they were 40 years younger and could still spar with each other. Hey, Kuro complained. She isn't wrong, Mukuse muttered. Kuro bopped him on the head in retaliation. I do a lot of target practice, Heiki continued, seemingly uncaring of the two squabbling. I could teach you if you wanted.